You know what? Let us talk superstars tonight on A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. 3 players that are already well established, that are already, let's say, have already broken through, but that are now on their way to becoming household names in the NFL. Let's get to it. Here we go. What's up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night, every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you guys in between with quick hitting videos Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So subscribe so you don't miss any Cowboys content on this channel. Excited about tonight. We're going to start off the week with some more positive conversations because that's what I'm in the mood for. And thus, I decided, you know what? Let's wait a little bit on the training camp battles a little bit longer. There's still about 2 weeks left to go before Oxnard kicks off with the Cowboys in training camp and all that. And I thought, hey, why not talk about the top players, to put it one way, on the roster that are not yet superstars. So not Micah Parsons, not CeeDee Lamb. I guess you could add Dak Prescott in that group of players that are now trying to go from very good to elite in their positions to like straight up superstars around the NFL, recognized by the national fan base instead of just Cowboys fans. And these are all players that have something to prove as well in 2024, right? It's kind of like that fine line between, my own fan base knows what's up, to like, now I want to let the world know what I am all about. And I've come to 3 players that I think they all are really worthy of being on this list of tonight's show. And this is honestly just going to be a lighthearted Cowboys conversation because it's July, right? It's mid-July now, July 14th. And I think we could all use that light conversation in this particular Sunday night. Welcome everyone into the chat, by the way, into the show. We've got Gregory, we've got Joe, Mark, who says, been a long time. Damn, that bass is loud on my phone. Sorry if I have to adjust some of the volume settings. I haven't looked into it, but I will after tonight, just based on that comment. Sorry if that's been bothering you guys for a while now. Joey Vela, shout out to you, sir. We've also got Gregory. We've got Daniel saying happy Sunday here in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Make yourselves comfortable. Make yourselves at home. Let's talk some Cowboys football. Number 1 on the list tonight. And, off-season is list season. So that's why we're doing a lot of, 5 players this, X reasons why that, blah, blah, blah. I think it's a fun way to structure some of the conversations. Number 1 on the list, though, I think this is the obvious answer. A player that is trying to go from well-established at his position to becoming a household name in the NFL. I think you got to start with tight end Jake Ferguson. I don't think there's any other player that I could start with because Ferguson is very close to breaking through to that level, right? 761 receiving yards in 2023, 5 touchdowns. He's proven that he can be a very, very productive player at the NFL level, right? And for those who have watched the tape, they have seen that, this guy is actually putting everything together. You can see him be a factor in pass protection, right? Where he's burying defensive ends and just hitting them, sending them to the ground. You can go watch the Philadelphia Eagles game where he did a lot of that, the Seattle Seahawks game where he did that against Boye Mafe, if I remember correctly. He's putting it together. But he doesn't come up yet, at least, I believe, especially if you look at it from a national point of view and not just within the Cowboys fan base. He's not yet coming up in these conversations when people are discussing Travis Kelce and George Kittle and even Sam Laporta, right, who as a rookie really turned it up with the Detroit Lions. You got to give it to him. Had 10 touchdowns in 2023, kind of like these crazy numbers. So what does establishing himself as a superstar look like for Jake Ferguson? I believe there's 2 benchmarks he would have to hit for him to reach that kind of like recognition around the NFL. And it's either one of the 2, because Sam Laporta, let me see if I am remembering this correctly, but Sam Laporta was just a second team All-Pro, wasn't he, as a rookie? Yep, he was. And he had 889 yards, which is pretty close to 1,000, but it's still not 4 digits in that area. He did have, though, 10 touchdowns. So I think it's either Jake Ferguson getting close or eclipsing the 1,000-yard mark or the 10-touchdown mark for him to really reach that level. Now, that's just from a stat point of view. However, I also think it's got to become a little bit of this, can you become Dak Prescott's go-to target in game day? And that's a tough thing to ask for somebody like Jake Ferguson, because he happens to be playing on the same team as CeeDee Lamb, arguably a top 3 wide receiver right now in the NFL, right? So we know that Dak is going to be looking at CeeDee pretty consistently throughout the season. But can there be some games where that becomes Jake Ferguson? Or whenever the Cowboys get into the red zone, can it be Jake Ferguson that he's looking for, right? Like, there's got to be these big-time moments, potentially even in the playoffs. And Jake Ferguson was perhaps the lone silver lining in that Green Bay Packers loss by the Cowboys. Or that loss against the Green Bay Packers. That's probably better said. But can he become like that guy, right, consistently for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense? And if he does, and if he really gets these big moments like the one he had in versus Seattle, right, with the Jamal Adams matchup where Dak Prescott finds him in the end zone pretty much to end the game, that's the kind of things that if he puts it together consistently, and I believe he has everything to do so, and I think Cowboys Nation is all in on number 87's stock, I think he's going to be brought up when we talk about Travis Kelce, when we talk about George Kittle, Mark Andrews. If there's somebody on this list that we're going to discuss that I can see NFL fans, pretty much every NFL fan knowing by name immediately, I think Jake Ferguson is the likeliest to reach that kind of level of recognition. Because there's also like everything else beyond his play, right? Just his swagger, his style, the way that he makes it extremely clear that he cares about this damn game and he cares about this team and he's going to go to war for the Cowboys. Like, that also adds something special, I think, to the, I think Gen Z would say aura, right? I've seen that term thrown around a whole lot on social media over the last few months. But yeah, I think Jake Ferguson should be on this list. Mark Aaron says in the chat, Fergie is a beast. Gregory with a very interesting one. He says Donovan Wilson. I wouldn't have thought, spoiler alert, about Donovan Wilson, especially at this point where he's already somewhat of a veteran, I would argue, right? Already has that second deal and everything. But Donovan Wilson, what I do believe is he's going to benefit a lot from the Mike Zimmer scheme. We talked about this not that long ago while I was on vacation. We had this show prepared about the safety position. We talked about whether or not Juan J. Thomas could put up a fight for his starting role. I do think Donovan Wilson is going to benefit from the Mike Zimmer coaching or Mike Zimmer scheme, excuse me. But I'm not sure if I would say straight up going to be a superstar for the Cowboys. I'm not sure. Karen says he's going to become the next Jason Witten, talking about Ferguson. And he could easily be the best tight end since Jason Witten on the Cowboys. Shout out to Dalton Schultz. I know he had some very good seasons and all that, but I think Jake's upside is just insane at this point. Like, he's putting it all together. He's talked this offseason about what he's focusing on. He's mentioned blocking in the run game, so that's going to be exciting to watch in 2024. He is willing, which is a huge starting point for a tight end, right? Just being willing and not scared of getting dirty, of getting into the blocks. And you know that that is not going to be a problem for Ferguson. Now, number 2 on the list for me, and again, for those of you who are just joining the stream, these are already players, or these are players that have already established themselves, but now taking the next step to that national level of recognition, that true superstar level. Number 2 on the list, and it's another player, or the first player on this list actually, that has All-Pro honors. It's got to be cornerback Theon Bland. This might be a little bit more controversial, maybe for some people, but here's the thing. Bland was a first-team All-Pro, made NFL history with the most pick sixes in a single season. So a lot of people will be like, he's already a superstar. But I can guarantee you that if you grab 1,000 fans randomly walking through the streets and ask them for their top cornerback in the league, pretty close to zero are going to say Theon Bland. I think the names that you would get would be Patrick Surtain, right? Sauce Gardner, and these are very good players. Nothing against them. Jalen Ramsey, perhaps you might get here and there. Someone might get creative and bring up a more obscure player, perhaps. However, no, I think very few people would say Theon Bland, even with the record and all that. So I do think Theon Bland has something to prove in the sense that he's just got to do it again. Not make NFL history, right? Because that would be an insane ask to make of him, but just remain one of the best cover corners in the entire league, which is something that I think he can do. Because you watch the film, and Theon Bland likes to play an aggressive brand of football. He's gonna set some traps for opposing quarterbacks. He does a lot of off-ball coverage, right? So you watch Theon Bland film, and it's not like he's gonna be pressing every single receiver that he faces. Sure, he played a lot of man coverage under Dan Quinn, but he was usually a little bit off the ball, right? Giving them some cushion, giving them some space, and that allowed him to set up a lot of traps for opposing quarterbacks. And these are traps that quarterbacks fell for, because otherwise Bland wouldn't have set that mark, that high interception mark. So that is huge, I believe, for Theon Bland going into 2024, just being able to build on what he already did in 2023, right? Put himself on the map. Now, can he excel in coverage? And can he become this player that we talk about consistently, even if the interceptions are not there? Do you remember like the early season or early career of Trevon Diggs when he set that interception record and all that, and everyone was like, boom or bust, right? And then that conversation became a little bit, how could I say this? Like, it stopped being valid once Trevon Diggs started moving away from those tendencies and started playing just better coverage, which I think was what happened after the season where he went insane with the picks. He didn't get as many interceptions, but he was a much better cover player because he found that sweet spot. Can Theon Bland do that and avoid the bad moments like the one he had versus the Washington Commanders when they were picking on him? Because Sam Howell was picking on Theon Bland that day, or even Geno Smith with the Seattle Seahawks. And listen, that performance was one of the best quarterback performances of all year. So just got to give a shout out to Geno Smith. Like, he was on that night versus the Cowboys, but he was picking on Jordan Lewis. And not Jordan Lewis, sorry. We're not even talking about Jordan Lewis. Theon Bland. And it got to a point where Dan Quinn even had to adjust, and then we saw Stephon Gilmore shadow DK Metcalf, which is unlike everything that Dan Quinn had done to that point in Dallas. So it was bad for a moment. Can Theon Bland avoid those kind of instances? And I think that's what he has to prove to graduate from being an all-pro player that lit it up one year to becoming a superstar cornerback in the NFL. And he's exciting. I think he's got what it takes to really develop into that kind of player. So it's going to be cool to see where his game is at 1 year removed from all of the history, from all of the pick six hype, right? And just who he is in a quote-unquote regular year, right? Now, I like one of the names that is being brought up in the chat right now. And Gregory says Sam Williams. Arturo says, yep, Sam Williams. They got to unleash him. I think Sam Williams is like, and I might do a video about this another day, but I think Sam Williams is like the player everyone is forgetting about. And I've touched on this before on the show. Sam Williams And he's not on this list, by the way, spoiler alert. So he's not number 3. But I see what you're thinking, and I kind of agree with it in the sense that Sam Williams is still produced. A limited playing time in 2023, but he still got some production in. Maybe not as insane as when he was a rookie and he went crazy. But I think our problem, or the problem with Sam Williams, doesn't have to do with production in a limited playing time amount or limited snap count. It rather has to do with the fact that that playing time did not increase last year. So going into the second year of Sam Williams in the NFL, we all thought that 25% snap count was going to skyrocket to like 50%, and maybe he was going to leap Dorrance Armstrong, Dan Fowler Jr. together and all that. That did not happen. Sam Williams' playing time did not increase. And maybe that has to do with the off-the-field stuff, and maybe that has to do with the fact that he was flagged many times on special teams, on defense. It always seemed that there was a problem discipline-wise with Sam Williams. So maybe it has to do with all of that. But I do think from a talent point of view and a traits point of view, Sam Williams could still be that guy. And if he is, and you've got Marshawn Kneeland developing in the background as well, the Cowboys might be set at defensive end for a good while, assuming that they get the Micah Parsons deal done next offseason, right? Because you would have Williams, Kneeland, and then Micah in that group. So you would be comfortable with it. Now, I wouldn't list him as a future Cowboys superstar because I would have to see him be a starter first. And if you noticed, Jake Ferguson, Theon Bland are the names that we've touched on so far. These are not only starters, these are standout starters, right? So these are guys that are taking the next level. I think Sam Williams has several levels to clear before he can get into the conversation of being a superstar, because he's not even starting so far. He's not even hitting the 50% snap count mark. And I'm not piling on Sam Williams or anything. It's just the reality of where he's at this point of his career. However, he is perhaps the first name that comes to mind if I'm listing breakout candidates in 2024. He's got to be up there, right? So I understand what people in the chat are saying. Brian Thompson says Sam Williams is a good rusher, but he needs to watch his penalties and use his head. And I think we're all on the same page regarding that. So I agree with you, Brian. And by the way, thank you for being here and thank you for watching. Now, number three on this list, 3 future Cowboys superstars with something to prove in 2024. Talked about Theon Bland having to prove that he can be consistent, that it wasn't a one-year wonder type thing. Jake Ferguson trying to prove that he belongs with the elite of the elite in such a fun position to watch in the NFL. Number 3 is a tricky one, because I don't think you can call many of these guys superstars. I'm going with an offensive lineman. You already know who he is, Tyler Smith. Let me tell you where the inspiration for this episode came from. ESPN is putting together the rankings that we talked about during the Micah Parsons episode last week, and how the discourse around Micah was getting ridiculous. ESPN is polling anonymous NFL coaches, executives, and scouts. And that way, they're putting together a top 10 per position. So they're showing you their top 10 edge rushers, their top 10 defensive tackles, their top 10 this, their top 10 the other. Tyler Smith was not in the top 10 interior offensive linemen after a second-team All-Pro season. So if you're just going by that, right, 2 left guards, 2 centers, 2 right guards, that should be your top 6 probably. But NFL voters or NFL decision makers around the league were like, nah, Tyler Smith is actually not a top 10 interior offensive lineman. He was left out of the list. That did get an honorable mention. And I can't remember if it was an executive or a coach who said this, but somebody was like, he's got great upside and he's going to be good because he's incredibly gifted, was the wording that they used. And I don't think that Tyler Smith should still be treated with the, oh, he's the next big thing type of discourse. I think he's already arrived. And we saw him dominate Aaron Donald on the field as soon as he was playing guard, right? When he was a rookie and he was playing tackle, he got exposed by some of the top defensive linemen that he faced. Second year, though, playing on the inside, that was not the case. He dominated Aaron Donald and beat him when the Cowboys played the Rams. He dominated Jalen Carter when the Cowboys played the Philadelphia Eagles. Who else did he face? I think dominated the Giants' defensive tackles, who have always been pretty damn good. Tyler Smith passed the 2023 test with flying colors, and all while putting up the numbers as well. Pass blocking efficiency, as measured by PFF, he was top 5 in the NFL, and actually top 3 in the NFL. Wasn't as high in the ESPN pass block win rate stats and all that, but he was ranked pretty high by PFF. The film stood out. Second team All-Pro. You could argue that he was better than Zach Martin. And Zach Martin, by the way, spearheaded the ESPN rankings. Among interior offensive linemen, he was number 1 on that list. Tyler Smith out of the top 10. I think even though you cannot be a superstar like other players can in other positions, if you're an interior offensive lineman, I think soon enough, Tyler is going to start getting that sort of recognition, just like Zach Martin does. Because what he did last year was pretty impressive, and that's only year 2 of his career, being a player who was perceived as a developmental player coming into the league, right? A player that, super strong, super powerful, nasty, but he doesn't have the technique down quite yet. And he has still found a way to win matchups in the NFL, and the technique is only going to get better, and it's only going to get better, and it's only going to get better. I think we're not that far away from Tyler Smith just being acknowledged as one of the best linemen in the entire NFL. That being said, though, it's true, he's a guard, so I'm not sure how much of a superstar he can be. Let's just measure superstar as the nationwide recognition that you're one of the best, even though you're not somebody from that fan base. And again, Zach Martin is a perfect example. Quentin Nelson from the Colts would be another good example, right? We'll see if Tyler Smith achieves that level of recognition. Let's see some of your comments, though, in the chat. Mitesh, going back to the Sam Williams conversation, he says, Sam will not get a second contract. A strong take. Gregory says, Turpin needs to be treated like a superstar if he is ever going to be a superstar. Man, Kevontae Turpin is an interesting conversation just because it's so difficult to evaluate him, right? Because he's gotten limited opportunities. But I cannot be mad at that personally. Like, I just cannot be mad at the way that they've used him so far. Year 1 was very special because he was fresh off of the USFL season. So you were not going to overuse him for obvious reasons. And then second year gets incorporated into the offense. But I understand the Cowboys being like, yeah, I would much rather have Michael Gallup and Jalen Tolbert out there on the field. You do wonder, though, if they're going to use him more in 2024. Sounds like it. I know Mike McCarthy has kind of alluded to that possibility, trying to find ways to implement him a little bit more. And that's where the whole situation about Deuce Bond trying out at slot wide receiver gets kind of muddy. Like, how much can he do if your number 3 wide receiver role might be rotating between Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks and Kevontae Turpin? It's going to be pretty difficult to figure that one out, personally, I think. Mark says if they would use him correctly on offense, he could be for sure. I do wonder, though, what does the correct usage for Kevontae Turpin look like? Now, I will say this. I'm not sure about superstar for Kevontae Turpin. Again, just going back to the Sam Williams thing, I need to see him start first before I can make him a candidate to be a superstar. I do think it's fair to wonder, like, what is the best case scenario for Kevontae Turpin? I don't see it being a superstar caliber player. I honestly think, at least right now, he's a little bit of a gadget player, right? Where it doesn't make sense to have him on the field at all times, but it makes sense to have him on the field at some times. And whether that is near the end zone or in the low red zone, high red zone, whatever it is, where you can use his speed vertically and horizontally, while the defense is more worried about number 88, number 87, right? But it's tricky. It is tricky because I wouldn't say KaVontae Turpin's best case scenario is being an NFL superstar. This is a good point, though. That isn't hard to do when they don't use him at all against Green Bay. It's a good point that, hey, when everything is not working, should they have tried to find ways to implement him? You look at the San Francisco 49ers game from week 5, and you're like, one of the few instances where you were explosive was when Dak Prescott targeted KaVontae Turpin down the field and scored a touchdown. Brian says Turpin time won't be a superstar, but a very good player. I think I would be content with let's say, more consistent usage from KaVontae Turpin and at least multiple looks per game, right? And not have games where he's not involved at all. Because I also think it's a little bit of a matchup problem or homework for the opponent where they've got to have a plan to deal with that speed. But yeah, as I said, like I just don't see KaVontae Turpin being like a player with... I'm not extremely pissed at how they've used him, is what I'm trying to say. Because I do think you have a limit with what you can do with KaVontae Turpin. Now, I would much rather have the Cowboys be like, oh, this number 3 wide receiver needs to be on the field at all times. Like, I would feel more comfortable with the offense if somebody breaks through enough to where it's like, yeah, I would just rather not move Jalen Tolbert or Jalen Brooks from there. You understand what I'm saying here? Am I making sense at all? Right? Sure, wide receiver 3 by committee sounds fun, but also let me get a wide receiver that proves to be good enough to where you don't want a committee. You just want him there at number 3 consistently, pretty much. This is a good benchmark from Brian. 4 to 5 times a game for offense, and then his special teams plays. Yeah, that I would be fine with. That I would be perfectly okay with. Just find ways to get him on the mix and to get the defense worried about what he could do, right? And not have that only be jet sweeps and end the rounds. Try to find ways where he's doing a little bit extra. And there were times during the season where the Cowboys used him this way, but maybe it wasn't week to week, which is where the Cowboys maybe could improve their usage of KaVontae Turpin. That being said, though, my 3 superstars candidates for the Cowboys, just to recap, number 1, Jake Ferguson. He needs to prove that he can be the guy that wins the Cowboys some games and becomes that guy for Dak Prescott, that reliable target other than CeeDee Lamb that Dak can force feed the ball to a little bit more often. Theon Bland needs to prove that even without the picks, he can remain an excellent cover player, avoiding moments like the one that he had versus the Commanders in Thanksgiving versus the Seattle Seahawks late in the year. And then number 3, Tyler Smith. I think he just got to keep doing what he's doing, and he'll get the recognition later on. But these are the 3 Cowboys that I look at that are already well-established starters, trying to make that jump for a national recognition. Let me know in the chat if you think that I missed anybody. Let me know in the chat if you disagree with any of the names that I brought up on tonight's show. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, hit the like button. I'll see you tomorrow night with a short, quick hitting video, and again live Thursday night, 8 p.m., just like every Sunday and Thursday. Ladies and gentlemen, training camp is so close, 10 days away at this point. It's exciting. In 10 days, they'll be in Oxnard. We'll have more to talk about. Have a good rest of your Sunday and enjoy your night. Bye-bye.